Mary Tabb, a producer of Growing Green, and I've got the host, Bruce Crawford, alongside of me. And it's such a beautiful place that we came to. Why don't you tell the viewers where we are?
So we're at Fernbrook Nursery. So we're down in Bordentown, New Jersey today. We're going to be talking with Larry Kuzer, who's the owner. Larry is extremely enthusiastic about native plants and about feeding the birds, because one of the things that we don't think about is how many caterpillars does it take to feed a bird, and not just the parent, but the fledgling chicks and so forth. So, or I should say the chicks before they fledge. So the point is, you know, what is it that homeowners, what we should be looking at? How should we be planting our yards, and how should we approach it? So Larry is really passionate about this, and so I think that'll come out today, because he's one of those people that once he gets started, he just runs with it. So and I think we'll have a great time talking to him.
I can't wait to meet him.
Me too. So, and I've known him for years, but I'm always happy to see him again. So,
great.
Glorious day, great spring, great to be here.
Absolutely.
Hello everyone, welcome to Fernbrook Nursery. My name is Larry Kuzer. I'm the owner of Fernbrook Nursery. We started back in 1982. We grow approximately 400 acres of trees and shrubs of all different types, probably over 350 different kinds of plants. But today we're talking about trees and the diversity of trees that we grow, and we grow probably a lot of trees you never even heard of. So, but the important thing is your yard, your landscape, and how different varieties of trees can fit into your landscape. So we're going to walk around the nursery a little bit. I want to show you how trees are grown, how we get the kind of product that you want, a quality product, and hopefully increase the value of your properties in the process.
So I want to emphasize that what Larry does here, what he grows, is for contractors, for garden centers, and for just general purpose sales. So it's not for homeowners to come here. So this is where the material is grown that you see in your local garden center. And what's important about it is he's not growing just one type of plant, because then obviously you can get in certain diseases and insect problems. He's growing a huge diversity of plants, which makes for a far healthier nursery in the long run. So some of the things that he would like to talk about and address are some of the things that are very current today. And we're looking at a lot of issues with plants becoming invasive and a lack of food for certain insects. So Larry, would you like to talk a little bit? I know there's a gentleman named Doug Tallamy that has been getting a lot of input these days. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would like to just introduce two concepts. We've mentioned diversity already. And why is diversity important? Well, right away, you've heard of the Asian longhorn beetle, which was eating all our maple trees all over the state. So now, gee, can we grow maple trees, and how does that work? Now we've got the emerald ash borer. Any of you that have ash trees in your neighborhood or in your yards, you know, this little critter is killing the ash trees. And we have bacterial leaf scorch, which is affecting our oak trees. And there's a whole list of diseases and insects, as you mentioned, Bruce, that, you know, how you combat that is you don't just stop growing certain trees, you grow a diversity of trees. So you're not attracting insects for any one specific reason. The other goal I would like to propose for your yards and your landscapes is what, Bruce, you just mentioned, Doug Tallamy. So Doug Tallamy is a professor of entomology. He's a bug guy, studies bugs. And for 25 or 30 years of his life, he has made a connection between insects and plants. He's not only done it for trees, he's done it for all kinds of shrubs, he's done it for flowers, annuals, perennials, all that kind of stuff. If you got a pencil and can write it down, bringing nature home. So I'll say it again, bringingnatureHome.com. That's Doug Tallamy's website, and he gives you all the trees, how they're connected, and all this kind of stuff. So what happens is, let me tell you the story of nature according to a chickadee. And this is Dr. Ptolemy's research. You know the story. Dr. Ptolemy's research at University of Delaware. So chickadees, if you know what a chickadee is, it's a little bitty black and white bird. And so they set up some nests on the campus and put a video camera watching this nest. Now, from the time the eggs are laid from the time the chicks hatch from the eggs till they fledge is 17 days. So for 17 days, mom and dad chickadee, little bitty black and white birds, are flying all over the place getting food for the baby chicks. 17 days. Now, in that 17 days with the video camera on them, you can only do this with graduate students, you understand that?
I understand that.
So the graduate students then would go count, and these chickadees, he had pictures of this stuff. I mean, they'd come in with green caterpillars, yellow caterpillars, black caterpillars, little bitty caterpillars. Sometimes they'd have 3 or 4 in their mouth. You can imagine a little bitty bird with 3 or 4 caterpillars in their mouth. So they feed caterpillars to their chicks. In 17 days, those chicks brought over 6,000 caterpillars to that nest. 6,000 caterpillars. One nest of chickadees. Now do a little math in your head and you say, how many millions, billions maybe, of caterpillars are needed to feed our birds? Let's talk to the Audubon Society. According to the Audubon Society, songbirds in North America have declined by close to 50% since 1970. Why is that? Part of that reason, besides pollution and windmills and anything else you got out there, part of that is because there are food deserts. Where do those millions and billions of caterpillars come from? Well, this is what Dr. Ptolemy, bringsyourhome.com, remember that, this is what Dr. Ptolemy has studied, and it turns out he found a list of trees, and oak trees are number 1 that produce caterpillars for songbirds. The other thing the Audubon Society tells us is that 90% of songbirds feed their chicks in the nest caterpillars. Why is that? They're soft, they're squirmy, the birds, they can go down their throat easily. The little chicks cannot eat seeds, they cannot eat anything hard, and he has proof of that where a nest would be near a bird feeder and the chicks would be dead in the nest and the nest would be full of seeds. So songbirds have to have these caterpillars. And you think, oh my gosh, I don't want caterpillars in my yard, all this kind of stuff. Well, chances are you've never seen 98% of these caterpillars. So planting these kinds of trees in your yard is allowing these caterpillars to thrive. By the caterpillars thriving, and they all turn into moths or butterflies or whatever. So what you're not only doing is getting a shade tree in your yard of some merit, shade, beauty, if they flower, all this kind of stuff. We're going to talk about some different shade trees that are more important. But again, going back to that website, Bringing Nature Home, that lists all the trees, lists all the shrubs, lists all the perennials, lists anything you want, and it tells you how many insects they support. So a perfect example is the American elm tree. So the American elm, one of our native trees, and we're going to be talking about native trees here. The American elm tree, which was in in New England towns, the New England greens, they made these beautiful canopies. The elm trees all died because of the Dutch elm disease. Well, the Dutch elm disease came from an insect like our emerald ash borer that just destroyed a whole species of trees. Well, the good news is the American elm tree is back. There are several species of American elms that are resistant to the Dutch elm disease and are readily planted in your yard. But we planted that looked like an elm tree. We planted the Zelkova, if you've ever heard of a Zelkova. So a Zelkova makes that nice vase, arching branches shape. And then, so the Zelkova had the same shape and all that kind of stuff as the elm. But guess what? Guess how many insects the Zelkova supports? Dr. Ptolemy found out 0 insects, while the elm tree supports probably over 50 species of caterpillars. There's not a choice here. The choice is yours, you as a homeowner, to plant those kind of trees in your neighborhood, in your yard, on your streets, in your parks, wherever you can.
So as we're standing here with Larry in one of his hoop houses, one of the things that we would like to go through is what's the process that it takes to go from, let's say, an acorn to a mature tree. And one of the things that, when you go to nurseries, you always go, wow, why do the trees cost this much money? They're growing in the woods. Why do they cost this much? So I think Larry is dying to show us what the whole process is to go from a small little plant to a bigger plant. Am I correct, Larry?
That's it.
I knew it. So Larry, take it away.
Takes a long time. There's
takes
no
a
doubt
long
about
time.
That. So we can start out, and this is an oak tree, and I don't know if you can see, there's a little bitty acorn right there. And this is 1 year from an acorn. So that acorn was put in this pot in a greenhouse situation. Let's see, we're in April. This was probably done back in November. And it's a heated greenhouse, so you get this kind of growth on it in a greenhouse in 1 year. Now, so this little acorn job here, I get this out of the pot. There it is right there. And you notice the pot has holes in the bottom, so that's because oaks typically have a taproot, and you're trying to make sure that taproot doesn't stay with it. And then, so we put this in a bigger pot, this size pot. So basically this tree, and we put a stake on it because everybody wants a nice straight tree. So this is 1 year later. So you start with this, you got about a year in this one. 1 year later you have this. A year after this, this will be up over the top of the stick. Then we can put it out in the field. Now, there's different kinds of pots. So here's a pot. It's called a root maker pot. You want to hold that for me, Bruce?
Sure, I'll hold that for you.
And then, so if you take this out, you can notice that you don't see any roots at all, because it's got all these fins and everything down inside the pot,
Notice too,
which got a lot of holes in it all on the side. Now, if you take, well, we can take a pot like this.
He's coming back.
This is so this is a cherry tree. This is 1 year. Here, I'll let you do the honors. 1 year, knock that pot off of there. 1 year, so now, you see, you can compare the roots of this to the roots of this. So when you're buying a plant, I don't care whether it's a tree, a rhododendron, a holly, whatever, an azalea, you want to knock it out of the pot and you want to see what you're getting. So here you don't see any roots. Here you see all these roots. Now if you're going to take this home and plant it, the recommendation, and Bruce, I'm going to put you to work again.
Oh, good.
The recommendation is you got to cut those roots. So you can cut them top to bottom just like that, all the way around. You got to cut those roots and get them so they're going to go out in the soil. Because what's happened here, you saw they're going around in a circle. You don't want them going around in a circle. You want them to go out into your soil. And the best way to do it is take a knife, sharp knife, a saw, shovel, square pointed shovels. That's the way to do it, with a square pointed shovel. And now you're ready to go in the ground. The other thing that happens, if you have a name for a tree, you've heard of an October Glory maple, you've heard of a Shademaster honey locust, you've heard of what would you say, Zelkova we mentioned before, Green Bay Zelkova. The American elms are called New Harmony. There's a Princeton one. They have a name like that. Usually a name means the tree is grafted, which means the roots and the top are separate, all right? They're a clone. Everything is a clone if it has a name. If it doesn't have a name, it's not a clone, it's native, and you've got the genetic gene pool and all that kind of diversity. So you've got trees that are going to be more resistant to a lot of insects and stuff, as well as support more caterpillars and support more pollinators and stuff like that. Now oaks, you don't find oaks with names. There's very few. So oaks are all native trees that are going to support all the stuff we've been talking about. A lot of your cultivars, when they have a name, like October Glory Maple, if they get a disease, it all spreads through them all. If you've got a native red oak, the native red oak, if it gets a disease, it's like people. It's like this coronavirus going on. Some people get it, some people don't. It's the same thing with plants. So the more native things you can plant that are not named necessarily, and oaks, again, not only the #1 for pollinators, but they're also going to be #1 for disease resistance and all that kind of stuff. How they get started and how you're doing things. The next step is we put them in the field. So now we're going to go to the field and take a look at what these things look like a few years later.
One of the things that you really need to pay attention to is the diversity of trees, and I know that Larry's been speaking to this point quite a bit today, but one of the trees that we were going through the nursery and all of a sudden I saw this Aesculus pavia, which is a red buckeye. This is a native plant. You hardly ever see it for sale, but horse chestnut is one of the common names, yes. And it has a red flower at this time of year, but it grows in the shade, gets up to 30 feet tall. It's a fantastic small tree that seems to really have not caught on with the public yet, and I think most of that is the fact that people just don't get it out there. So anyway, I wanted to draw attention to this. Some of the other plants that are surrounding us right now are oaks, which Larry's going to talk to a little bit about, but we also have beech trees and we also have service berries right around us. So again, in this one field right here, there's a great diversity of plant material, all of which is native, which is very important because again, Larry's been speaking to, each plant attracts its own caterpillars, its own population. Each one's a little bit different. And that's one of the reasons why if you look at a Bradford pear or Callery pears, which you see the white flowers all over the turnpike, nothing eats a Bradford pear. So these are sources of food for our caterpillars, and that's what we're proposing today. So Larry, would you like to give a little tour of the oaks?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. So I would just add a little bit to what Bruce said, which is another one of Dr. Ptolemy's ideas, that we, residents of the United States, can make a huge difference because we're talking about planting different trees. But the other thing that Dr. Ptolemy doesn't like, and I have to support because I don't like it either, are lawns. Everybody likes lawns. But Dr. Ptolemy has proposed that if we planted as little as 10% of our lawns, if everybody went out and said, okay, square footage of your lawn, take 10% of that and plant some trees, plant some pollinators, that we literally could reverse the decline of songbirds, we could reverse carbon sequestration issues, we could reverse global warming. Now that sounds like a pretty grandiose thing, but he calls it homegrown national park, because if everybody took 10% of their lawns and planted them with certain plants that he's recommending, you're looking at close to 20 million acres, which is bigger than Yellowstone and Yosemite National Parks. So that can be done in our backyards. So every one of you has the power to make that difference. Just plant a tree. And we're suggesting different kind of trees. Now, the oak we looked at before. This little guy with the acorn, so you saw it grows for 3 years now in pots. Then we bring it out in the field. This is the same thing. This is a swamp white oak, Quercus bicolor. There are over 12 oaks, varieties of oaks, that are indigenous to the state of New Jersey. You haven't heard of some of them probably. Shingle oak, willow oaks, overcup oaks, what's Muhlenbergi? Help me out here. Chinkapin oak. You've got your red oak. Your red oak is the state tree. You got white oaks, you got black oaks, you have chestnut oaks, all through our woods, all over the place, and all of these are huge supporters of caterpillars and therefore songbirds. So these are bicolor oaks. If I go across this field here, this is a bur oak. Bur oaks again grow from Maine to probably out to Minnesota and down through Tennessee. So it's got nice corky bark to it and those kind of things. All these trees you see here will get to be 60, 80 feet tall, if not taller, some of them. And then over here we've got the American elm. So this is the American elm. This one's called Valley Forge. And again, nice vase shape, upright branching, and supporter of all these pollinators, as well as it's a native tree. It's our native elm. So we're going to walk down another part of the field and look at another group of trees that some of which maybe you've never heard of before. So if we can walk down here, we've got more different oaks. Some of the oaks hold their leaves in the wintertime, so you get that effect. If you look farther down, there's a one called a scarlet oak, which is very similar to a pin oak. Everybody's heard of pin oaks, but pin oaks are the most susceptible to bacterial leaf scorch. So a lot of people are saying, I don't want to grow a pin oak. What are your choices? As I say, you got 12 other choices or more for nice oaks. Over here, and again it's going to be a little hard to see, but we've got two kinds of trees. One is called the Eucommia, E-U-C-O-M-M-I-A. Eucommia, common name is hardy rubber tree. Very tough tree, especially in an urban environment. Takes dogs and children, takes pollution, takes road salt, all that kind of stuff, survives all that. Another tree, which is a summer flowering tree, is called a Mackia, M-A-A-C-K-I-A. So a Mackia is a little slower growing than some of the others, but nice pale yellow flowers in the summertime, and again it's going to get to be 60 feet tall, nice shade tree. So a lot of choices, all the different oaks that are out here, the elms, American elms, and as I say, Bruce was talking about before, the pavia, Aesculus, the horse chestnut. So you've got all those kind of choices, you know, which are really important. 10% of your yard should be planted in some kind of tree, some kind of pollinators. The other concept, I just thought of this, which Dr. Ptolemy mentions. Think of your yard same way you think of decorating your house. Your lawn can either be wall-to-wall carpeting or your lawn can be area rugs. The recommendation is make your lawn area rugs, not wall-to-wall carpeting. So if you make it area rugs, you've got little patches here and there. Get a good design, have fun with it, and plant diversity.
So Larry, those are phenomenal ideas, and I like the fact of the carpeting and the area rug, because when you do an area rug, you then have that area to put in the plants that we haven't spoken about yet, but perennials. And a lot of our perennials, which we'll talk to in pollinator plants, and they will be future episodes to come, but they will then provide the food for the butterflies, bees, and whatever have you. So future, you really have to think about area rugs. So Larry, thank you so much for this really great tour of your nursery, talking really about how it's important to be diversified within a nursery field, but also important to be diversified within your homestead.
So we have one more stop to make, which will be looking at the harvesting of these trees. So we've shown how we start them, we grow them, we put them out in the field, we grow them bigger. At this stage you can see some holes in the ground, so we have to harvest them. And I want to teach you something about what that process is all about.
Hey, I'm Mary Tabbitt. I'm here with Tanya. Tanya, your last name?
Gregory.
Okay, great. So Tanya, what is your role here at the farm?
I am the sales manager, the office manager, and I do a little bit of everything for everybody, especially in the spring.
Okay. So we're standing next to a holly tree.
Correct.
And it looks kind of yellow. Is it dying or?
No, that's one of the most popular questions in the spring. This is the process that American holly goes through in the spring. The leaves will turn yellow and they will eventually fall off. They will probably lose about 25–30% of their foliage. But as that's happening, we have the new growth coming out and emerging. So you'll get new growth probably to about 6–7 inches. And at that time, everything is nice and soft. Your tree looks a little funny because it's kind of naked on the inside. It's got new growth on the outside. About a month later, it all evens out and it looks beautiful.
And what time of the year is it the most beautiful?
I would say probably in the winter when it has the berries.
Yeah.
Red berries, you feed the wildlife. It's beautiful to look at. People use it as decorations for the holidays.
Okay. Well, there we go. We've got our answer from the pro. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you have a question for a pro, email it to growinggreenaskapro@gmail.com. If your question is selected, you'll receive a Plant Something t-shirt from NJNLA.